Thank you for joining the Chamber's business update call with three of our bank CEOs in the greater Danbury area, along with two representatives from the Connecticut Small Business Development Center, who I will be introducing momentarily. My name is P.J. Prunty, the President and CEO of the Greater Danbury Chamber of Commerce, and will be serving as the moderator for our call this afternoon. Kicking things off, we are joined by the State Director of the Connecticut Small Business Development Center, Joe Ercolano, along with his colleague, Valeria Biscaglia, the Integrated Learning and Business Advisor with the Connecticut SBDC. Joe, I will now turn it over to you, your opening remarks for an update from the SBA.
Thank you, PJ. Good morning, everyone. This is the Small Business Development Center, and we are funded by the SBA and the state of Connecticut, Department of Economic and Community Development. So we are basically working to help small businesses across the state, not just with their everyday issues, but currently with helping to navigate the various systems of assistance that Congress and the administration have provided to help deal with this pandemic. Valeria Biscaglia is our in-house expert. She's going to take over because you'll have questions that I know I won't be able to answer, but she will, because she's been at this a lot longer than I have, putting a lot more hours into it. But we appreciate the opportunity to update you. I want to just point out that today there's several programs that you probably are aware of, but today we're going to focus on the Paycheck Protection Program, which was passed by Congress, signed by the President on April 3rd. Actually, I'm sorry, on March 27th. The program kicked into play on April 3rd, and then again this past Friday for self-employed and 1099 contractors. That's where you approach banks, and if those are there participating, you can apply for a loan that can be forgivable if you meet the criteria for that. So let's just jump right into what is the Paycheck Protection Program. Basically, it's an SBA loan through the 7A program, administered through approved lenders with a focus on helping businesses keep their workforce. As you'll hear later, when we talk about getting the loan forgiven, it's all about maintaining payroll and bringing people back on if you've had to lay them off. So can you apply? If you're under 500 employees, you can qualify, you can apply. You may be actually larger than that if you meet certain SBA criteria. You may also be eligible to apply. Depends on your industry classification. Most nonprofits that are under 500 can also apply. Some faith-based organizations, or all, if they meet the criteria, are eligible. Sole proprietors, self-employed, independent contractors as well can apply for this loan. But you must have been in business or operating in operations on February 15, 2020 in order to be eligible. So basics, you can apply for up to 10 million. We'll get into how you calculate how much that you're actually eligible to apply for. And your interest rate would be 1%. The terms are 2 years, and collateral and personal guarantees are currently waived. Requirements for that are waived. Allowed uses include your payroll and as well some health and leave benefits, payments on mortgage interest, utilities, and debt incurred prior to February 15th, interest on debt prior to February 15th. These loans are not intended to replace lost sales or for growth or expansion. So just keep that in mind. And most importantly, 75% of the loan proceed must be used on payroll. That the goal here, Congress's goal, was to keep people employed or get them back to employment as quickly as possible. So a real quick explanation of how you will determine how much you could qualify for is to take your qualified payroll costs and take out any excluded payroll costs and such as taxes on Social Security, payroll taxes, and then that equals your payroll, your payroll costs that you use for the calculation. Calculation is basically to divide your annual payroll costs that are allowable by 12 to get a monthly average, multiply that by 2.5 times, and you will then be able to see your amount of your loan term. If you were not operational in 2019, then your average monthly payments for payroll costs incurred in January and February of this year would be how you calculate the basis for your loan, 2.5 times that. You can also calculate for seasonal workers, employees, and there's some definition of that. I want to point out too that all of this whole guide, this is taken from a guide that we've published and put on our website, ctsbdc.com. At the bottom of the slide, you can see /COVID-19 Business Resource Center. If you just go to ctsbdc.com, up in the middle of the page at the top, the tabs will have Business Resource Center. Click on that. This guide is there. It's a couple of pages, but it walks you through this entire process. You can get all of this information because it's all taken from that guide. This is a quick list of what's qualified payroll costs. You can see it's basically compensation with respect to employees. That's salary, wage, or commission, payment of cash tip or equivalent, payment for vacation, leave, whether it's family or medical, parental, allowance for any dismissal or separation, payment required for provisions of healthcare benefits, including insurance premiums, payments for any retirement benefit, payment of state and local tax assessed on the compensation of employees. So that is what you basically put into your qualified costs. In addition, for sole proprietors, it's the sum of payments of any compensations to or income of a sole proprietor or contractor as wage, commission, income, etc., that is not more than $100,000 a year or prorated for the covered period. So if you are facing over 100K, you're basically going to take the 100K as your qualified costs and ignore anything above that number. You can see on the right, compensation that's excluded is anything above 100K, as I just said, any payroll taxes or any compensation to people whose principal place of residence is outside the US. Qualified sick leave wages for a credit that's allowed under a different act, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, is not allowable as a qualified payroll cost. How do you apply? I guess we're going to hear from a few lenders in a minute, and they could describe their process. But basically, you find an SBA approved lender. If they're participating in the PPP, there's an online application process, and you could run through that quickly with their information. They all have great websites, the ones we've seen. You probably want to look first to the bank you have a relationship with. It's a great suggestion because they're going to be able to, know you, and they're going to be able to move this through quickly. In addition, some banks that don't have a relationship with you may be hesitant or reticent about accepting your application right off the bat. So the advice is to go to a bank you have a relationship with. And the documents you'll need are your tax returns for 2019 or a year-end balance sheet that shows profit and loss, your last 4 quarters of payroll forms, Form 941, verification of the number of employees and payroll incurred over the most recent 12-month period, identifying employees in excess of 100K, and then if you're self-employed, Form 1099 MIS-C. Lenders will need to verify that you qualify, that you were in operation on February 15th, 2020, and check your numbers that you are submitting as your qualified costs and as your calculation for the loan. What happens after you close the loan? You'll have to use the funds in the 8 weeks following, pretty much, and for the allowable uses that are mentioned, payroll costs, rent and utilities, mortgage and debt interest. No more than 25% of the forgiven amount can be used for non-payroll costs. So keep that in mind. That's you're limited to no more than 25% for non-payroll. As far as forgiveness of the loan, you basically have until June 30th, 2020 to restore your full-time employment and salary levels for any changes made between February 15th and April 26th, 2020. So in a little bit more detail, You're eligible for forgiveness to apply for forgiveness and submit documentation to your bank, provided you use the funds for its eligible uses, and you have certification that you certify. You sign a document that says the documents are true and correct. The SBA will pay any loan forgiveness amounts to the certified lenders on your behalf, and this canceled indebtedness will not result in taxable income to the business. Principal amounts on payment protection program loans may be forgiven if loan uses are, as we've talked about, to cover payroll, interest payments on mortgages, not including prepayments or principal, rent, and utilities. And to get this, you must keep your employees and pay them at least 75% of their prior year compensation. So this program is about payroll protection, right? So do you have to bring someone back at full time? No, you do not. Do you have to bring the same people back to this position? No, you do not. It's all about the payroll that you're spending and on a monthly basis, and how much you're spending over 8 weeks during this period. And again, 25% of it can only go for, no more than 25% can go for non-payroll cost. If you do decrease payroll and you can't restore back to the level that you've had, your loan forgiveness will be reduced by the decrease in your full-time employee headcount or in the total amount of payroll that you have. So your loan forgiveness is really tied to your getting back to that level of payroll. And again, you have until June 30th, 2020 to restore your full-time employment and salary levels for any changes you made between February 15th, 2020 and April 26th, 2020. So I'm going to stop there. I know I ran through that real quick. We anticipate that there'll be a lot of questions, but I think, PJ, as we talked about, that I think you want to give some other speakers a chance to jump in.
Excellent, Joe. Appreciate the insight and the update from the SBDC. Your time is always great value. So before I pose some questions to our guests, I'd like to introduce our bank CEOs who are joining us this afternoon and ask that they each take a few minutes to share how they are managing through this crisis with their staffs. There might be something we can tap into back at our respective organizations. So first up, we have Martin Morgado, the President and CEO of Savings Bank of Danbury. Martin, welcome. Thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, PJ. Thanks for inviting me. I think the series of calls the Chamber has been putting together are very helpful and informative for the community, so thanks for doing this. But as we talk a little bit about the logistics of everything that we're doing, the banks are considered an essential business, so we're open. And the logistics of operating a bank, they have changed a little bit. Well, we haven't closed any of the branches that we have changed the way we interact with our branches. We have temporarily closed all our branch lobbies, and most transactions are now being done through the drive-up. But if a customer needs to meet with us, we schedule an appointment and we will meet with them. We have seen, with all the changes that are going on, an increase in customers using our digital channels, the online, mobile, and remote deposit. We've also, with the changes, increased the number of people in our call center. And for the most part, our customer has been accepting of all these changes. As far as our employees go, approximately 75% of them are now working remotely. We've provided them with all the equipment they need. And this has been a big change because most people are not used to working at home. Our departments have daily check-in calls. And for those that are coming into the bank, we have social distancing protocols that they have to abide by. What we are finding is that we're communicating with our customers on a more frequent basis while they're at home. And what we are hearing from a lot of employees is that they miss each other and can't wait to get back together again. So that's just a little summary of how banking has changed a little bit for us and for our customers from our point of view.
Excellent, Martin. Appreciate that. Just like banking, the Chamber, we're in the people business, so we're certainly missing everyone as well, too. Next up, we have Ken Weinstein, the President and CEO of Newtown Savings Bank. Ken, thank you for joining us. We appreciate taking some time.
Thanks, PJ. Thanks for having me and all of us, and thanks for doing this on behalf of our community. Just a few comments from my standpoint, certainly similar to a lot of what Martin said, so try and talk about a little different aspect of it. First off, this is an incredibly challenging environment for all of us, but it's important to keep our perspective. The challenges we're facing as bankers are nothing compared to what those in the healthcare community and our first responders and people who've lost jobs and government officials and of course those who are ill and their families are dealing with. And we try to keep that in mind. Where we've found one thing through this is that not feeling too sorry for ourselves is a great coping mechanism. In terms of our staff, it's really similar to what's going on outside of the workplace. We have some employees who are busier than they've ever been. We have some who have very little to do, and we have others who are in the middle. So we've been working to get resources where they're needed and addressing that on a daily basis. Some of the changes we've made were very predictable and have played out exactly the way we expected them to. For instance, as Martin mentioned, we knew going on that our branch traffic would decrease and our call center traffic would explode. So we shifted resources into the call center so that we've been able to maintain good service levels, while others have been things that couldn't have been foreseen. For instance, we certainly didn't see a $350 billion government program of forgivable loans coming up, but we're sure glad that came through for our economy. At the same time as we're trying to address the crisis situation, we continue to do business because the economy needs to keep moving, or else we're going to see even worse joblessness and pain than we already are. So for instance, we have a very large mortgage refinance pipeline, and our commercial banking team closed last week on one of the largest new loan and deposit relationships in the bank's history. So we're continuing to do business, and we're excited that today we're closing our first Paycheck Protection Program loans and dispersing. So that money's going to start getting out there. To keep operating effectively, we're constantly monitoring where we're facing bottlenecks and challenges and what people and technology resources we have available to help out. Our employees understand the magnitude of this crisis, and they've been wonderful, as I know Cindy's and Martin's teams have been, in doing whatever they can to help our customers, our communities, and each other. They get that this is real and that at times like this, banks play an important role in maintaining confidence and in getting credit where it needs to go to keep the economy humming. So that's a bit of a perspective on what's going on in our shop.
Excellent, Ken. I appreciate the update from Newtown Savings Bank. And then last but certainly not least, we have Cynthia Merkle, the President and CEO of Union Savings Bank and the current chair of the Connecticut Bankers Association. Cindy, welcome, and thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, PJ, for having us. And, Martin, Ken, and I, very friendly competitors. And we really have worked closely over the years and probably talk to each other a little more often these days in this difficult period of time. So I'm not going to repeat, some things they've said, because I think we're all managing it the exact same way, from closing our lobbies to moving our staff to where they're needed. But I'll just focus in a bit on managing a remote workforce. And for many of our listeners do that day to day, but it was to a certain extent fairly new for banking. We all had a few individuals that worked remotely, but in the case of Union Savings Bank, we have close to 200 people now working from their home. And that presents a management challenge because it can be very isolating for them. And we really need to upgrade the quality of communication on an ongoing basis with these individuals, so we can really make sure there's some engagement. So early on, we developed, kind of the protocols for working remotely, which would obviously include security. Security is utmost for all of us in this environment. But more importantly, how to keep them engaged with one another. And what we're finding is they're talking across, department lines more and more on a daily basis. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we too shifted resources to where we needed them. So we have someone who would normally be in our community relations area, who is now over helping us with the PPP loans to make sure that we can get those out to our customers. Just last week, we introduced our selfie week, where individuals, whether they're working in the workplace or at home, can take creative selfies and get them into our human resources department, who then is distributing them in a fun way for the entire USB team member population. So we're trying to make it personal, and our managers have done a phenomenal job. They have either a daily huddle with their team members that are working from home, or a weekly staff meeting. I know I start every day with a business continuity call at 8:30, and there's about 30 of us on that call, and we go through every area of the bank to get updates as to what's going on with staffing and our branches. We, like probably every business, have had to encounter either team members or a family member of a team member who has tested positive. And so we have developed our own quarantine, self-quarantine protocol. If we need to close a branch, we immediately send our team members home for self-quarantine based upon standards from the CDC. And we do a thorough cleaning, and then we bring in another team. So we've tried to minimize the disruption to our customers through the drive-ups and the call center. So again, I think all community banks have been working pretty closely as far as the protocols, and more importantly, now dealing with the PPP loans to make sure we can get them through efficiently to our small business customers.
Excellent, Cindy. Thank you. Appreciate the update and the employee engagement taxes you guys are putting through. It sounds like a pretty great idea. So thank you for that. All right, we will now move into some of the questions that I received prior to today's call. And additionally, for those able to access the chat button, we encourage you to that platform as well. And I will try to get those into the queue as well. Cindy, we'll sort of circle right back to you. I know you're currently serving as the chair of the Connecticut Bankers Association, as I mentioned in your intro, which represents banks throughout the entire state. Can you provide any insight on the association's activities during this crisis and how it is helping the businesses in our state?
Sure. Thank you, PJ. So I have had the distinct honor to serve as the chairman of the Connecticut Bankers Association. Timing in life is always interesting. Right. But I do, the Connecticut Bankers represents, all of the community banks and the regional banks in the state of Connecticut. And, the administration association has really done a good job. We have been working very closely with the American Bankers Association, along with the Independent Community Banking Association, really dating back to February. And, we have daily phone calls with those associations. I had the opportunity to be in a conference call just about a week ago with our secretary, with the head of the SBA and the head of the SBA technology group, representing the banks and the frustrations that the banks had as far as, receiving communication on the guidelines that we could then customers. And by working collectively, I think, we've been getting the guidance we need. From a customer perspective, it may seem that it's a bit confusing because some of the guidance has changed along the way. If I were to caution anyone, I would caution and just say be patient, because the team at the SBA has been doing a tremendous job. When you take volume that you would normally get over a 3, 4, or 5 year period and get it a couple of weeks, it really is, it takes a bunch of heroes to get that through, as well as the banks. I just got my number this morning, at USB, and we had hit the 1,000 mark, over $100 million in these loans. And so again, that's volume that our bank would not have received in a couple of years. So the association really has tried to work with the various CEOs. I know Martin and Ken have been on some of our CEO calls. And from an executive perspective, I do believe Washington is listening. And, that's at the end of the day, that's what we need for our customers.
Thank you, Cindy. Appreciate that. Martin, we'll pivot over to you. So from all reports, the banks are seeing record levels of volume from the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP, as it's being referred to. Can you share with our listeners what level of activity you are seeing and what the impact has been on your staff?
Sure. We've been very active with the PPP program. We actually started to get active with it before it even came out, when it launched on the 3rd. The first few days were extremely busy. We received hundreds and hundreds of applications over that first weekend. We were taking applications from both our customers and non-customers at this point. When we began preparing for this program, we put together a team of about 15 to 20 employees dedicated to just the PPP loans. We took an all-hands-on-deck approach to this, and this has helped us to meet the volume and the demand that we've received. The first weekend, the team worked processing and approving loans, and they worked all weekend long. I have to say, the team's been great, and we really feel we have a good process to get through all the applications that we've received. Although I have to say, we've experienced some struggles, and I think Cindy mentioned that, and as well as other lenders have had the same struggle. It takes some time to get these applications through the SBA system. With all the volume the system's had, it's crashed a few times, and the process has been a little slow, but we're getting them done. Over the last week, over the last couple of days of last week, we started to see the applications slow down, where we were just taking in about 40 to 50 applications a day compared to what it was when it first started. So all in all, it's we got a lot more applications in than we normally do over the course of a year in just a few days. So I think we're doing well with it, and we just need to work through the process to get them closed, which we're going to start doing this week.
Excellent. Thank you, Martin. And Ken, is it a similar story at Newtown Savings, and do you expect to see it slow down over the coming weeks? I think you mentioned in your opening comments you have closed on the applications, correct?
Yeah. So very similar to what Cindy and Martin have said, and I want to be respectful of time and not repeat the same thing. But we got the same initial blast from people, and the level of work that people have been putting in, morning, afternoon, and night since the program launched 10 days ago, including throughout each of the last 2 weekends. And I kept getting texts from people asking if we could put the alarm on in the building later than we were supposed to, because they kept wanting to work a little more and a little more and a little more. And I think, the way we're thinking of these loans are, these aren't loans. These are businesses and jobs that are preserved. And so our people have a lot of passion for that. We've made a lot of progress in getting through the pipeline, but we still have lots of work ahead of us. As I mentioned today, we're closing our first loans and dispersing. So, that's a good milestone, but it's just going to put a small dent in it today. The SBA set a 10-day target for getting the loans closed and dispersed from the time they're approved, and we intend to meet that target. As Cindy mentioned, and it's funny, we use the same word. I use the word heroic about the SBA. That this is a massive and unforeseen program that's been developed on the fly using technology that wasn't designed for the volume, and yet the SBA has been able to get it together this quickly. In terms of potentially slowing down, it's tough to predict anything these days more than a couple days in advance. Like Martin said, we've seen a bit of a slowdown from the original explosion, but should the program be expanded or extended, and there's discussion in Washington about expanding it, we could still see very significant volume. In the meantime, we all have plenty of volume to handle, and we're going through it as much as we can. The one other thing I'd mention just that we're very concerned about sort of as the next phase of this is that for the people getting the loans, the business owners, to understand that the forgiveness of the loan isn't automatic, and that people need to be careful in terms of how they spend the money and to keep documentation in terms of how it's spent, because it would be tragic to have a business owner who thinks the loan is forgivable not pay quite enough attention to what the rules are. And the rules aren't overly complex, but there are rules, and the banks aren't going to be in control of what's forgivable or not. So we're really trying to emphasize with our customers the importance of being on top of that forgiveness part, because there's a big difference between a loan you have to pay back and a loan that's forgivable.
And thank you, Ken. Appreciate that point. That's very, very relevant. We'll pivot to the SBDC now. Valeria, a question for you. April 10th was listed in the U.S. Treasury documents as the date sole proprietors could and should apply for PPP. What insight could you provide on how a self-employed person or sole owner of a single business is supposed to answer the question about payroll in the application?
In the slides that Joe was showing before, there was a section speaking specifically to independent contractors and the self-employed. Again, my suggestion is to go back to that guide as Joe was mentioning, but because it will walk you through it. But basically, sole proprietors, single member LLCs, independent contractors usually report their earnings on Schedule C when they file their taxes. So they will take a look at their net earnings on Schedule C to use that as their starting payroll calculation. If they do not have, like if they have a net loss, for example, on Schedule C, but they have draws or payments to self that they reported on their taxes, that's what they would use as the starting point for calculating their payroll.
I appreciate that. And I just received a question earlier on about accessing the deck that Joe was using. What is the best means for someone to obtain that information? I think they said
So again, rather than the deck, all the information that is on the deck was actually taken from our guide. So if you go to CT for Connecticut, SB for Small Business, DC for Development Center.com, ctsbdc.com. Right at the top of our main menu, you will see COVID-19 Business Resource Center. And right at the top of that page, we have a downloadable guide that includes not only all the information about the Paycheck Protection Program, but also about the disaster loans, grants, and additional information that will be useful.
Excellent, thank you. And just to follow up on the PPP, what is the deadline for recipients to use the loan for payroll and have the loan forgiven?
So the loan is meant to be used for eight weeks of expenses. As a business owner, you can choose to retroactively use it back to February 15th, or you can use it going forward with a deadline of June 30th. And by that time, you have to have brought the same levels of staffing back to payroll. Once those 8 weeks are done, then you have 60 days to reach out to your bank and show how you spent those funds to document that you spent them in the way that the program outlines so that you can request the forgiveness. Again, it's important to know the forgiveness is not automatically granted. You have to have all your documentation together to show how you spent your funds and bring those to the bank to request for that forgiveness. One quick recommendation that we've been making to our clients is to perhaps open a second checking account where they can deposit those funds specifically related to the Paycheck Protection Program. That way it is a lot easier to show how those funds were spent and make sure that they're spent, again, under the guidelines of the program.
Excellent, thank you. I just shared that link with everyone on the call, so thank you for that.
Great.
Switching back over to the bank CEOs, Martin, as you're dealing with the increased demand, do you have any advice for businesses that have applied, whether at Savings Bank of Danbury or at any other bank?
Sure. Thanks, PJ. We know businesses need the money as quickly as possible, but we also know, as Ken mentioned, it's not just about the money, it's about the number of jobs that get saved. So we're working as quickly as we can to get the money out the door. So I guess I would have two pieces of advice. One would be to try to put together a complete application with all the docs that we need to get your loan approved. Most banks, and I know the three of the banks on this call today, have really good websites that contain all the information borrowers need to put a package together. If we have the information we need, we'll be able to get your loan approved a lot quicker. But if you need help, you can always call, and we all have people available to help. But the second point I'd like to make is to be patient. We know how much you need the money, and we're all working hard to get these loans closed as quick as we can. But with the high volume, it just takes a little bit of time. Just a little perspective, we're turning around loans for hundreds and even millions of dollars in about 10 days, when this process normally would take us a few weeks to do it. So I guess the two pieces, again, would be to put together a complete package so that we can get through the process a lot quicker, but also just be patient with us because we're working very hard to get this money out the door.
All right, great. Thank you, Martin. Appreciate that. Valeria, going back to the SBDC, do you believe that the money that has been allocated will run out? Simply put, what is being done to potentially supply additional funding if necessary?
So the program was set up on a first come, first served basis. So it's certainly possible that it will run out. The second part is not a question that we can answer ourselves. As far as we understand from participating in calls where we've had some of our state senators, the delegation is working on additional options, but there's nothing that has been defined yet. Just to Martin's point, I want to make sure that everybody knows that part of what the Small Business Development Center does is to provide no-cost assistance to small businesses. So as you work on putting your application together and knowing how busy and how much volume all the banks are experiencing, please feel free to reach out to us. We can help you understand what you need to put together for the package. It doesn't cost you a penny. It's your taxpayer dollars at work. So take advantage of that so that you know that once you reach out to your bank, you have everything you need. And that way, your local banks can concentrate on actually getting your application through instead of having to go back and forth to get all the information. I mean, they're all happy to do it. We're all happy to help. But the more prepared you come, the easier it's going to be and the faster the process is going to be for you too.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. Cindy, back to you. In addition to PPP, is Union Savings Bank offering businesses any other types of programs to assist them during these challenging times?
Thanks, PJ, for the question. Union Savings Bank does have a number of programs where we're working with existing commercial business customers as well as our consumers that have run into difficulty during this challenging time. And from all reports, I think all of the banks have various programs where if there is a customer that has lost tenants or what have you, I would encourage them to call the bank, as I would encourage our customers to call our bank. I know right now we're working on a couple of hundred requests for deferral of payments. And from a consumer perspective, on the mortgage side, we're helping our customers there. If the loan is with Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, they also have come out with programs and protocols for the banks who are servicing for them. We waived all of our late fees starting on April 1st on our consumer and our business loans, just to try to help people for the next few months. We have a number of things that we've done and we're continuing to work on, but again, I would encourage anyone, whether it's a consumer run into issues or a business, to contact their local banker.
Thank you, Cindy. I appreciate that. And then, Ken, I would pose the same question to you, but we'll put it in terms of the consumers, as many of our business owners and their employees are also being challenged with their personal financial needs.
Yeah, so there are so many people out there who are struggling due to job loss or other aspects of this pandemic, and there are many, many more who are okay now but are fearful about the future. And we're a community bank, so we always work with our customers who are going through difficult times. The only difference now is that the volumes are obviously much higher, and we talked before about shifting resources. And one of the things we've done is that we've shifted a bunch of our market managers that you might think of as branch managers into that effort to make sure that we're able to be responsive to people who are going through difficult times. To get a little more specific, we're participating in Governor Lamont's mortgage relief program, which he put together in conjunction with the Connecticut Department of Banking and the Connecticut Bankers Association under Cindy's leadership. And that program includes several elements. So there's 90-day forbearance, which means that if you're in good shape before the pandemic and you're struggling now because of it, you won't need to make payments for the next 3 months with the potential to extend if necessary. No mortgage-related late fees, no new foreclosures for at least 60 days, no missed or late payments reported to the credit bureaus for those who are in forbearance. And as Cindy mentioned, there's similar forbearance for all of the federally backed mortgages that we service. Just a couple comments. The big question we're getting is what happens after the forbearance period ends. And the federal programs, for instance, suggest that the payments will be immediately due at the end of the forbearance period. So you might owe 6 payments at the end of 6 months. That's probably unrealistic and will need to be addressed based on how things look when we get to that point. And is it a V-shaped recovery or something different? I would guess that in most cases, borrowers will catch up on the missed payments over a period of time. But if the economy is weak, it's possible that policymakers will just make it possible for those payments to be added to the end of the loan. That's an unknown as of now, but what is known is that people who are struggling due to the virus can reach out to their bank and get relief right now. So that's the important point. The other thing I'll mention just quickly is there haven't been many, but there have been a few requests coming in from people who haven't lost their job and don't have issues, but thought they heard that they could skip their mortgage payments. And I would just ask on behalf of our bank and the industry that for any of us who are fortunate enough to be doing okay financially now, that we hold off on those types of requests and let us focus our resources on people who are struggling.
Thanks, Ken. I appreciate that. And I've got a couple of these questions come in relevant to the comment that Joe made in his opening statements about dealing directly with businesses that you have accounts with. But for those who are not clients but looking for a PPP loans, approach either of your banks respectively, and are you now handling sole proprietors? I guess Cindy, I'll pose that one to you to start.
PJ, could you read that? It was broken up.
Yeah, no worries. Should those who are not clients but looking for a PPP loans approach their respective banks, and are you now handling sole proprietors?
Well, we're at Union Savings Bank, we're prominently handling our own customers at this point because of the demand and the number of them. And, we had the sole proprietors did come in and our, the self-employed, we signed up on Friday from that group. As a bank, we have to certify that we know our customers. And so that can be a lengthy process. And so that really is why we made the decision up front to be able to existing customers before we open it up.
Excellent. That makes sense. Appreciate that. Martin, we'll kick it back to you. I've recently read a number of articles on fraud and how businesses and consumers are unfortunately falling victims to scams. Do you have any advice for our listeners out there how to avoid these scams?
Okay, thanks. Actually, I have a couple of pieces of advice. Unfortunately, in times of uncertainty like this, fraudsters take advantage of the fears surrounding an event, and criminals try to find ways to exploit the situation. So, there are a number of things on all our bank's websites talking about what consumers and business owners should be aware of. But just a couple of recommendations I have. Watch out for phishing scams. That fraudsters using email, text, websites to trick people into disclosing their private account numbers. Don't click on links or attachments you're not familiar with, and never give anyone your password. All things that could lead to a lot of problems for you. You should keep your computer or your mobile device, your cell phone, your tablet, up to date with the latest security software that's available. And finally, the last thing I would say is remember that the safest place for your money is the bank. It's physically secure, and it's federally insured by the government. And, I can say this pretty confidently that each of our 3 banks have been around for more than 150 years, and no one has lost a penny. So I think those would be my 3 recommendations or pieces of advice. But I would recommend that you go out and look at our websites, and you can get more information there.
Excellent. Thank you, Martin. I appreciate that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that does it for our questions this afternoon. I'd like to once again thank our guest speakers today, who are clearly working around the clock to assist our local businesses with accessing the critical needs and resources that they need during these challenging times. Once again, I'd like to remind those still on our call that the Greater Danbury Chamber of Commerce is here for you and your business. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me. Just pick up the phone, give me a call, or send me an email. And we will be continuing to host these Zoom calls over the next several weeks. If there are topics or presenters you'd like for us to bring on, just let us know. And finally, in an attempt to try and take everyone's mind off of COVID-19 for just a few minutes, the Chamber will be releasing our first video from our Out of Office series that we have been working on over the past year. And the series focuses on highlighting local businesses in our area, and we thought that it would serve as a much needed positive reminder of all the truly wonderful businesses that we have in our community. So keep a lookout for that video in the coming days. With that, we will be concluding our call. Thank you for joining us. Please stay well and stay safe. Thank you, everyone.